Hey everybody, Michael from RogueDeckBuilder.com here doing the deck tech portion for my example deck that I put in my article today, talking about the new Journey to Nyx mechanic Constellation, as well as one of the Constellation cards, which is Underworld Coinsmith. So, if you haven't read the article, I'll put a link in the description below, but be sure to check that out before you watch this video just to get an idea of how I feel about Constellation and Coinsmith in general. This video is going to be more specifically about this deck, my thought process going into it, and things like that, because I think that's the best thing about, that's the thing I enjoy most about deck techs, is just listening to people's thought process about their card picks and how the deck came to be. So I'll talk about that in this video. Hopefully you guys enjoy this video. If you have any suggestions for this deck, feel free to let me know in the comments below, or just what you think about Constellation or Coinsmith in general. Any thoughts about those things are perfectly fine, and I'll definitely check them out when I can. So this deck was quite interesting to make, actually. And the reason for that is it was very hard trying to find a good way to implement Coinsmith and just Constellation in general. And I wanted a deck that, again, as usual, had some removal, some multiple ways of attacking our opponent. But at the same time, because it's going to be including a lot of cards from the new set, I wanted a deck that would survive the first few early weeks once Journey to Nyx was released. And the reason for that is because I feel a lot of people are going to be going, hyper aggressive in the first few weeks once Journey into Nyx is actually released. The reason for that is they're going to be, I can see burn or hyper aggressive decks coming out of the woodwork, because they're going to be taking advantage of a lot of the newer experimental decks that are going to be coming out. And once people are trying to experiment with more cards, it's going to make their decks a little bit more clunky in certain situations. So just playing a really streamlined, aggressive deck is going to be able to take advantage of that. So I wanted a deck that really, really goes well against either hyper-aggressive decks or burn decks, and this is the rogue deck that I came up with. It definitely targets those decks, but it still has a really great mid to late game. That the thing I love about this deck is it's a very steamrolling type deck, what I mean by that is once it gets going, it's incredibly hard to stop, and it can easily take over games. And it's actually one of the few decks that has life gain as one of the main focuses of it, but at the same time, it doesn't restrict itself to that, and it actually has ways of winning the game, which is one of the things I think is important when considering life gain. It's one of the things that newer players generally fail on, is they see life gain as a way of just winning the game, when just life gain itself doesn't actually win you the game. It needs to affect the board. You need to be able to play threats. You need to have some way of winning the game still. And so this is the deck that I came up with to help with that. It uses a lot of incremental life gain, so you're in all the situations, you're generally only going to be getting 1 or 2 life, but over the course of the game, that's going to add up very, very fast. And so that is why it's going to be just doing tons of work against burn decks. I see this deck being a very good matchup for burn decks or aggro decks. And generally, it's just because of the creature set we're playing. And I'll get more into that once we hit the creatures, but we'll start off by talking about some of the non-creature spells that we're using. So I went junk to give us access to just the best kinds of removal that we can have. So Thoughtseize, no reason not to include Thoughtseize. This is a sort of a mid-rangey type deck, and being able to strip our opponent through their threats or counters or things like that is essentially what we want with Thoughtseize. Not much to say about Thoughtseize. Just one of the strongest cards in Standard. So 2 Abrupt Decays to be able to deal with cards like Detention Sphere or other Banishing Lights, as well as it does kill off any creatures that we need to get rid of. Very, very awesome removal spell, and one of the main reasons why we want to include green in our deck. 3 Devour Flesh, 2 Doomblade, 3 Hero's Downfall, and 1 Ultimate Price to be our removal set. Of course, this is going to change over time, but I feel this is a very nice sort of spread of removal that we can hit a wide range of things at the right times, as well as, I guess you could include Thoughtseize and Banishing Light within those removals. But yeah, not much to say about that. Really, only the numbers are going to be changing here. over the course of time. Banishing Light, one of the new cards from Journey to Nyx. This is one of the reasons why I absolutely love Banishing Priest. Is, as you can see, we don't have to play blue to be able to get access to a Detention Sphere type effect. Now we can just have white in our deck and still utilize the same effect and make the most out of it. So Banishing Light is absolutely awesome, being able to get rid of large threats like Pelucranos or cards like that, as well as other Planeswalkers. Planeswalkers is going to be the hardest thing for our deck to deal with, so we want to be able to get rid of those right away with Banishing Light. We are losing out on the ability to exile all permanents with the same name, but still, it is a really, really great card to have, and I definitely wouldn't mind even including a fourth one, possibly. Plus, it is an enchantment, which, as you can see by the name of this deck, I'm calling this Enchanted Junk. And so an enchantment is definitely going to help trigger off all the constellation triggers that we're going to have in our deck. And I'll get into that more once we get into the creatures. Land-wise, not much to say there. I didn't want to have all 12 Scry lands. We still want to be able to play things on time more often than not. So including the 2 mana confluence is perfectly fine with us, and because of the life gain that we're going to be having in this deck, we're able to play a lot of shocks and mana confluence and not worry about dying very, very quickly. So creatures, the very important part of this deck, and this is where the fun begins, essentially. So you can see some very interesting choices in this deck, and I'll get into a lot of the interactions once we hit them. I'm going to get into Archangel of Thune last. So the main card we're including is Underworld Coinsmith. So this is the card that I talked about in the article, and I feel this is one of the strongest Constellation cards in Journey to Nyx. So we're essentially, I think we're playing 17 enchantments in this deck, which is a lot of ways to trigger off Constellation. So that is a lot of incremental life gain. On top of that, it has a way for us to utilize that life gain and utilize it as a win condition, essentially. And it's nice because in these decks, especially when we have some ramp, as well as more land card draw through Course of Kruphix, we're able to really make use out of extra mana that we have to be able to pretty much grind our opponent down to 0. And Underworld Coinsmith is going to do a great job of that. And we're going to get a lot of Constellation triggers off this guy for sure. Not to mention, I mean, he's an average costing guy, so early on we can potentially swing in for 2 damage depending on what type of deck we're playing against, so that's always not a bad idea. That's not a bad thing either. We're including 2 Sylvan Caryatid to help with the mana fixing. We have a very hefty mana set or mana cost for our cards, and so being able to hit all the colors when we need them is very, very important, as well as being able to ramp into possibly a turn 4 Obsidian or something like that, or Archangel of Thune is very, very hard for our opponent to deal with. And so getting these 2 cards online is absolutely, very, very important for this deck. So only including 2, we'll see how it goes. I might include more, but green, we're not super heavy on the green, and who knows, I might even replace Sylvan Caryatid with something else, even more removal or more enchantments or something like that if we absolutely need to. But it does help, again, as you can see, it's a nice body to block aggression, being able to stop cards like Ash Zealot and other 1-drops. And over the course of talking about the creatures, you'll see how well our deck is suited against aggro decks or burn decks. 2 Obsidian. I first included 3, but then I wanted to make room for Archangel Thune and some other things, so I dropped it down to 2. And Obsidian is just one of the strongest cards. It's one of those cards where unless your opponent has a direct way to remove it, it's going to take over the game. And because we have a very, very large set of removal spells, we're able to potentially just swing in for 5. Even just once is a lot for us, and as well as the draining is going to help since we want the life gain to offset the costs of our shocks, as well as trigger Archangel of Thune and to be able to utilize that life gain to transfer over into more damage for Underworld Coinsmith. And that is the main thing with this deck is we have so many ways of gaining life and incremental life that over the course of the game we're going to be able to grind our opponent down to nothing through Underworld Coinsmith and our other creatures. And Obsidian is just an absolutely awesome card to have. For Nyx Fleece Ram. So this is probably one of the questionable cards you guys are wondering about. I love this card. I don't know what it is about it. It's very simple, but the effect over time is just so strong in this deck. And again, it's one of those cards where it totally roadblocks aggro decks, being an 0/5 for 2 mana, stopping Ash Zealot, stopping a ton of cards like Boros Reckoner or Fire Drinker Satyr, even if they pump it. Even cards like Frostburn Weird, even if it pumps it to 4, we can still block with Nyx Fleece Ram and not worry about dying. And this is the main card in our deck that's going to be getting us a whole bunch of life over the course of the game. If we can get it out turn 2, over the course of the game, I can easily see this getting us, 6+ life. We are trying to play a longer game with this deck, so getting a lot of life over the course of the game, again, is going to help offset our shocks and mana confluence and thought seizes, as well as any damage from burn. And also, if we have room to utilize the extra life, we can, again, pump it into Underworld Coinsmith. It's all going to be going back to Underworld Coinsmith, essentially. Plus, again, it is an enchantment creature, so it even triggers Underworld Coinsmith as well. So I love this card, and it's a card that can just sit there, defend our health, and just keep gaining us life over the course of the game. 2 Grim Guardian. This isn't in tappedout.net, so I'll switch over to a different window. So this is Grim Guardian. It's a 1/4 for 3, so again, a very large blocker to block our opponents. And it has the 1 power, so which is nice because we are able to block cards like Fire Drinker Satyr or Dried Militant, Soldier of the Pantheon, and be able to kill them off without having to worry about a guy dying. But again, it's a very nice constellation card for our deck. Being able to trigger off of Underworld Coinsmith, as well as trigger off Courser Kruphix or any of our other enchantments. And it's another way for us to slowly drain our opponent without having to pay a life through Underworld Coinsmith. So I really like this card. It works extremely well. And yeah, not much to say. It's very straightforward with our deck. For Courser of Kruphix, another really great card in this deck. Because we are, it's an enchantment creature, so it triggers off Grim Guardian, Underworld Coinsmith, as well as it helps us accelerate our deck, make sure we're hitting our land drops. Not much to say. It's just an overall really amazing card. And I'm sure most of you who watch videos with Courser of Kruphix being played, like in Green Red Monsters or things like that, you can tell how much work this card does. And even against burn decks, again, very large body to block Ash Zealot or things like that. Being able to kill them off as well. And also gain us a lot of incremental life. So, as you can see how the curve plays out, we can essentially turn 1 Thoughtseize into, a turn 2, either Sylvan Caryatid, Underworld Coinsmith, or Nyx Fleece Ram, start gaining some life, and then turn 3, Courser Kruphix comes down. So, even Courser Kruphix and Nyx Fleece Ram were more often than not gaining 2 life each turn after turn 3, which is huge. That is a lot of life gain over the course of the game, and because we have so much removal at hand, we're able to survive a lot of the burn decks or creature-heavy decks, and potentially just build up into, a couple turns later, just smack down an Archangel of Thune or an Obzidot and just take over the game from there, essentially. And speaking of which, Archangel of Thune, I might even consider just replacing another Obzidot with Archangel of Thune, because I think Archangel of Thune is absolutely nutty with this deck. Look how many ways we have to trigger off life. So the nice thing about Archangel of Thune is it triggers for each separate trigger of life gain. So what I mean by that is, for example, if we have 2 Nyx Fleece Ram out, and we have an Archangel of Thune, the following turn, we're going to get 2 separate triggers of Nyx Fleece Ram, which is going to trigger Archangel of Thune twice, meaning that we get 2 1/1 counters on all of our creatures. So this means that if we have, an Underworld Coinsmith out, plus our 2 Nyx Fleece Ram, and Archangel of Thune, everything is going to get 2 1/1 counters, meaning Archangel of Thune is going to turn into a 5/6, Nyx Fleece Ram is going to turn into a 2/7. Underworld Coinsmith is going to turn into a 4/4. And as you can see, right away from there, we're able to just start taking over the game and start actually using our creatures to attack, rather than just being able to hold them back and block, and be, you know, right when we play Archangel of Thune, we're able to play a lot more proactively and just really quickly close out games. So, which is absolutely sweet. I love this card in this deck, and we have so many different ways of triggering it. And again, with Courser, that's also going to be another separate trigger. So we can potentially grow Archangel of Thune incredibly fast in one turn just by playing our cards very passively, which is what I like about this deck is we're able to do a whole bunch of different things, but because all of our abilities are triggering passively, we're able to just get incremental life gain. But at the same time, we're still able to do other things. And again, the amount of life gain we're getting is always going to transfer over into potentially just draining our opponent with Underworld Coinsmith. So that is absolutely sweet. And because we are going to be potentially hitting all of our land drops with a Courser and things like that, we're able to make sure we have enough mana to utilize Underworld Coinsmith. So yeah, not much to say. I think this deck has quite strong potential. Quite a bit of potential, actually, especially against mono red aggro. Any aggro decks or burn decks, I think this deck is very, very strong to play, and very, very strong matchup indeed. So we'll have to see how it tests out. I mean, this is just the first draft. I'm sure the numbers will change, depending on how strong Archangel of Thune actually is with the rest of the cards. Definitely going to affect how many I actually play. So moving on to the sideboard. For the sideboard, is it essentially purely for the control matchup. The reason is I feel this deck is well suited for any creature heavy matchup, like I said, burn or mono red aggro. Control is really the only one that's going to be tough for us, but we're going to be just removing all of our removal essentially and replacing it with pretty much all of our sideboard actually. But this sideboard has a lot of different cards that I think can come in a variety of matchups, which is very nice indeed. So we have one extra Banishing Light, and this can come in for any heavy Planeswalker deck, like Bant Planeswalkers or something, to get rid of those Planeswalkers, or any other matchup where we feel we need the extra source of removal. For Duress, of course, to just an extra way of strip our opponent's hands of Supreme Verdict or counters or things like that. Erebos to be able to make sure they can't gain a lot of life back, because we are going to be sort of grinding them out with Underworld Coinsmith at some points. Them gaining life is not something that we want, but at the same time, it is another enchantment to trigger off our Constellation, as well as it is another way for us to utilize all the life gain that we're having. In conjunction with Underworld Connections, we're able to just draw through our deck quite fast, especially if we have something like Course of Krufix online. 2 copies of Rootborn Defenses. So this is for the Supreme Verdict, essentially, because a lot of our permanents are essential to this deck operating properly. We want to be able to keep them on board. So Rootborn Defenses is what we're going to be playing. We'll see how it works out. I mean, I'm not really a fan of the card, but it's really the only card we have access to make our cards, make all of our creatures indestructible. 3 copies of Sin Collector. Originally, I was going to have Brain Maggot in slot of this, which is another one of the Journey to Nyx cards, which is a 2/2 for 1 black card that essentially does a similar thing, but it exiles just any non-land card. It's not just restricted to an instant or sorcery card. But at the same time, if it gets removed, they get the card back in their hand. So I didn't really want that, because in control decks they have the potential to top deck into Detention Spheres or Supreme Verdicts or potentially any other removal to get rid of Brain Maggot to get that card back. So I think Sin Collector is a little bit better. Plus, it's a little bit of a larger body for us to swing with if we get the chance to. 3 Underworld Connections to be able to just, utilize a lot of the life gain that we have to just draw through our deck very, very quickly and keep drawing into threats, answers, land, whatever you need. It's just a really, really great card to have, especially since we are aiming for a longer type game. Underworld Connections wins very well against control decks. And if we can speed up into something like an Obzidot and make it resolve, Obzidot is very, very hard for them to deal with. So that is essential for this deck. 1 whip of Erebos. It's another great card that interacts well with Obzod if it happens to get destroyed or countered. But at the same time, I mean, it's another enchantment, as well as you can see, Underworld Connections is another enchantment as well. So actually, in the control matchups, we're including even more enchantments to go along with our Constellation triggers, which is pretty sweet. And it also gives all of our creatures lifelink, which means that every time we attack, we're getting one additional trigger off Archangel of Thune. Being able to whip things back is sweet, but really the main reason is for the interaction between it and Obzidot, so that's why we're only including one. But yeah, that's the deck. This deck seems like it's going to be extremely fun to play. I think it's going to have quite a high skill cap, because you are pretty much utilizing your life total as a resource very frequently, and so being able to play the right removal spells and things like that, and making sure you're not draining yourself too much is going to be quite important with this deck, because we do have a lot of Shocklands and Mana Confluence, so life total is going to be taking a hit in the early game, but over the course of the game, past turn 4, easily able to stabilize, I think, with this deck. And if we can land an Obzidot or Archangel of Thune, it's going to be pretty much game. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this deck. If you have any suggestions, feel free to let me know. I looked through a lot of the enchantment cards and bestow creatures and things like that. Wasn't sure what else I could add to this deck. If you feel something else is better suited for this deck, definitely let me know in the comments below, or any other enchantments you think that might be nice to include in this deck, or in the sideboard possibly, whatever works out the best. So yeah, again, if you haven't checked out the article, the link will be in the description below. And if you don't have an account on roguedeckbuilder.com and you read the article and have some thoughts about it you want to share with me, you're free to just leave them in the comments below of this video, and I'll get back to you on that. But until next time, guys, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.